Welcome to Biz Meds with Darris and Saad, where we give you the medications for your business. This podcast is all about the minimum effective doses you need to make a massive improvement in your business. Listen and enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And I am Darris.
So for today's episode, we wanted to talk about something you can immediately implement into your business and into your life that will drastically change everything that you're doing currently in your business and in your life and really help, improve that space for you in your daily life, in your business. So guess, do you want to get, well, I mean, you guys probably can't guess, but I was going to say guess in the comments below, but
It'd be preemptive.
Yeah,
Give
exactly.
it away.
Exactly. Questions. The topic we want to talk about is questions. And I'm sure you guys listening right now are like, what the heck are questions? We know questions, but questions are such a broad thing. You can ask a question about, hey, how's your day going? To, what is the meaning of life?
I mean, that's a very deep question. And I think, or really, like, why do we want to talk about this specifically? Or why do we say that, in the intro you talked about, here's one thing you can do immediately that's probably going to dramatically change what you're doing in your business and in your life. And it's really because the quality of questions that you are able to ask will dramatically alter the answers that you're getting. And in most cases, we're not asking the question, or we're asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
And so there's different levels of questions. There's different quality of questions. And I think that's why when we were discussing what we should talk about today and coming back to the idea of the podcast of, what's the minimum effective dose? What's something simple that you can do? Well, today we're going to dive into questions because it becomes more and more apparent that this simple topic is probably one of the most underutilized skills in business.
And in everyday life too.
Absolutely. In relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing about questions is there's so many different outcomes you can have from questions. Questions trigger critical thinking. Questions, feed your curiosity about areas that you're looking to learn more about.
Right.
Questions feed innovation.
They can, yes.
So especially in business.
Questions can also make people feel defensive.
Yep, definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
People...
Glad you said that.
Asking questions can make people feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
So there are multiple parts to questions. But I think today we're going to really talk about what are we actually talking about? And how can someone learn how to develop the skill of asking better questions? And that's really what this whole topic or this whole discussion comes down to. So let me relate this to my early days of learning how to sell. And I was very fortunate that I was mentored by, if you know Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, well, I was mentored personally by Robert's Rich Dad advisor, Blair Singer. And so I was personally mentored in sales by Blair. But I had some previous kind of sales, I'll say training and things like that. And I will say that for those people that are just, maybe you're early on and you are learning how to sell, and I know the topic of selling has come up quite a bit lately because, guess what? You don't have a business if you're not selling something.
And marketing. We're talking about marketing.
And marketing too, right? And so with that early training, one of the biggest leverage pieces that I learned was that when people were putting up objections, right? So you're across the table from someone selling something and they say, throw down an objection.
I don't want it.
Oh, okay, great. What specifically don't you want?
I don't like the fact that it's so expensive.
Oh, okay. That's a really reasonable thing to say. So what specifically are you comparing it to when you say it's too expensive?
To a Ferrari.
Oh, okay. So what is it about the Ferrari that?
I like that it's got this unique red and the wheels are bespoke. You just can't compare.
Right.
But, it's too expensive for my taste.
Oh. So help me understand when you say what is your taste? What are the sorts of things that you really value?
Need reliability, at least at this point. Need reliability. Need something that, gets me A to B. But, I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy driving it.
Okay, excellent. So in that little exchange, right, all I'm doing is asking questions, right? I'm not trying to convince you of anything.
And you're learning about me.
I'm learning about you,
yeah.
Right? I'm building some rapport. And so there's a couple things that are happening. One, I was taught early on that whoever's asking questions is in control. Mm-hmm. And so you'll hear different, people talk about it in different ways, but it's essentially the same principle, is that whoever is asking the question is more on the offensive or taking more control. And what you don't want to do in a situation, especially in a sales situation, is feel like you are defending and on the defense.
Agreed. Yeah.
So in that case, we want to make sure like asking good questions, and there's different quality of questions that I could ask in that situation.
Yeah.
But that's just really to highlight at a very basic level. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about, advanced selling techniques. It's not what we're talking about here. This is the minimum effective dose for things like specific in a sales situation. And if you are developing that skill, that is something you can do differently immediately. That's going to transform how you handle those things. Mm-hmm. Because most people don't have a really good sales process. They don't have enough time in the trenches to really develop a great sales choreography that takes them through, that actually builds multiple parts of a great sales choreography to move them to a buying situation or to qualify them.
You're absolutely right. And again, questions is such a broad thing. Not many people, a lot of people ask questions, but not many people comprehend what right questions are. So what we just kind of demonstrated wasn't rehearsed, so we were just kind of like trying to figure it out as we were talking. And that's the whole point, because when you're having conversations in an actual selling scenario, you're never prepared for that conversation. I mean, obviously you could have some iterations and everything, but every person is a unique experience. Mm-hmm. So I can share a little bit about my sales journey. I was fortunate enough to be trained by somebody that saw the value in selling right versus selling for the fact of just selling. And this goes back to my real estate days, where I was learning a lot about the products that I'm selling and how they so being on the sales side in real estate, also got to learn how the complexity of building the product and how hard it is. So a lot of times I'd have, obviously I think it was a joke, I'd have the construction guys tell me like, well, sell this product because it's a lot easier for us to make it, and like we can do it a lot faster. So you'd have that being fed to you, being new in the industry. Like you don't know what things are jokes and what you need to be doing to help the company grow as fast as possible and like help them make money. So subconsciously I was always like, oh, I got to push this product. I got to push this product. But luckily, I was being mentored by this guy that had been in real estate for about 20 plus years and had a lot of knowledge around those specific ways to understand why people are buying. So exactly goes into line with you when you said trying to just throw out knowledge sounds like you're defending something, and sounds like you're trying to force something. And every time somebody would come in, first thing I would ask is like, hey, what brings you in today? And very basic question, nothing super important, like just everybody asks that. And then once you kind of build that very basic rapport, understand what they're doing around in the area, You know, a lot of times you'll have, we're just looking around, because nobody wants to be sold to immediately. They need to understand what it is, because fortunately we live in a world where there's so many people just constantly forcing something down your throat just so they can make that money. So really understanding what it is that, that person needs, and how you can bridge that gap and help them with the product you have. So build that rapport, sit down, chat with them, figure out what brings them in, and then kind of educate about what it is that we have. And as you're kind of building rapport, you're kind of grabbing little things from them, just like you did with me, asking, why am I comparing it to a Ferrari when I'm not in the market for a Ferrari, right? It's like, so, it's very, very cool, because I didn't have the appreciation for it until I got into the space where I had to do it.
Yeah, and most people don't have the awareness. And that's a really important thing. That's all we're trying to do, is create some additional awareness in these areas that can give people some really very simple things that they can do differently. And in that situation, asking questions is a fantastic way to do that. And then it's ask better questions. So what is a better question I could ask? And in the beginning, you might just say, someone says, it's too expensive. Oh, okay. So what's too expensive? How much is too expensive? Or what would you be willing to pay?
And what are you comparing it to?
Yeah, and then that might be a slightly more advanced question, right? And then you begin to develop the skill. As you become more comfortable asking a question, you start to become, what that does is you ingrain that first response. Instead of verbally diarrheaing and vomiting on someone and start to tell them something and defending, you're changing your behavior a little bit, and you're understanding, I need to ask a good question here. This is not an attack. This is someone's just saying something. And in that sales situation, the true reason is probably 4, 5, 6 levels down of really good questions as to what's really going on. And it's never what they immediately need your reaction, tell you what's coming out of their mouth. There's other things. And that's why, in that scenario, that's why it's such a hack or leverage opportunity, because it's a very small, simple change you can make if you haven't been doing that, to have that happen right away and start developing that skill.
Yeah.
And then I think, let's talk about questions more broadly. And when we say, it could impact every area of your business and life. We won't get into relationships yet, but I think when we're talking about that, like having led a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations and coaching and things like that, specifically coaching, if you're trying to develop people, there's an element of, have you ever had a manager that just like told you to do something?
I'm having a
flashback?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I think we've all had that experience where we have people just like tell us to do something, and it's okay. Versus, have you ever had someone that actually sat you down and helped kind of increase your awareness, ask really good questions, and really dove into what was really happening and created a much different space? And what's the difference between the two?
Well, you feel safer. You
Right.
feel like you can actually open up and compare, or address the problems you're having.
Yeah.
And collectively move forward together.
Right. Yeah. So, and then let's tie that back let's go to the fundamental, when we talk about mindsets. And this is why I think questions are really important, because it's not only the questions that we're asking other people and creating a space where we can ask them great questions around something, and dive into that shortly. I think it's the questions that we ask or don't ask, I think are really telling of our mindsets. They are indicative. They really highlight, they open up and show you exactly what your mindset is. So do you have a growth mindset, or do you have a fixed mindset? And when you are in your own head and when you're thinking about things or telling yourself a narrative, I want you to think about, how many times are you telling yourself something versus how many times are you asking yourself something? Because those two things will give you two very different outcomes. For example, I can't go to the gym tomorrow. Statement, right? Typically, that's what we tell ourselves, or I can't do this, or I can't do this. Okay. Now, what happens if we ask ourselves, how could I do that? Or what could I do?
To go to the gym.
Or whatever it is.
Or whatever it is.
Whatever it is, right? Like it flips us from believing maybe a potentially false narrative to then opening up the opportunity to say, oh, what could I do? Or how could I do that? Or how could I achieve that? And so one will essentially dictate a course of behavior or actions that's going to make that true. The other one has the potential to completely rewire that whole outcome.
Yeah.
So, well, I couldn't do any sales. Couldn't do any sales call yesterday. Oh, you couldn't do any, or
you didn't do any.
You didn't do any. Are you saying you were just physically unable and like just impossible to make any? Or did you go into it with the goal of doing 10, and because you didn't feel you could do 10, you did none? And might it have been
sabotage yourself?
Yeah, right. And might it have been your mindset that could have been flipped around to say, okay, if I can't do 10, how many could I do? Or how could I do that? Am I feeling I have to do them all at once? And that's where I think it's, again, it's the power of the question. It's the really good questions that we're willing to ask of ourselves and other people is going to highlight, first and foremost, like a mindset. Are we telling ourselves a story? Are we deluding ourselves? Are we deluding other people? Or are we being, like, if you want to be really objective with yourself, the quality question that you ask yourself is going to be really important. And then when you're leading and coaching others, you have to be able to stand in a space where you're able to ask questions of people that they are either incapable, don't have the awareness of being able to ask themselves, their own selves, that question, or they're unwilling to ask themselves that question.
Yeah. So again, repeating what I said earlier, it's those types of questions that start firing your, opening up your neural pathway and making you figure out exactly how to make it happen, how to make it possible, how to move into that area.
Yeah.
And a lot of times because, everything is so driven by your mental energy and the way you perceive everything, asking the right questions, even to yourself, exactly how you said, really helps make those massive leaps that you thought you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely going from home to gym is not a massive leap.
Well, I mean,
but it can be. It can be on certain days.
Forgive me because I'm going to butcher who said it, but it's whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And I don't want to misattribute that to someone. So I'll just say, I don't remember who it is, but
I said it. It was me by Saad.
And I think, but that's indicative of how you perceive the world, what your mindset is. So you have an open or closed or growth or fixed mindset. And that's the fundamental part of all of that. And then how you start to change that is by asking questions. And so we talked early, at the beginning, there are the potential that when we ask the questions, people can feel defensive. So there is also an element of, when we talk about asking questions, asking the best questions. So, I could ask you, why the fuck did you do that? Is that a really effective quality question to ask somebody? And how's that going to make somebody feel? Is it going to get them to want to feel like, is that going to help them feel safe?
Immediately would make them feel stupid and like less than.
Right.
And then anything after, it's just going to be defensive, and the brain is not going to be open. Like they're not going to be receptive to the growth opportunity. It's just going to be.
Yeah. And then.
Sorry, that triggered me a little bit because like I remember one of my very early bosses, just I did something very minorly different, which was the right, like it was a progression into doing it right. And he was like, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, I was like, and I'd never had a confrontation.
And you still, right? I bet you can feel all the emotions you felt exactly in that moment.
But now with the knowledge I have and the way I can kind of maneuver around that, it makes me more angry because, I wish I had the knowledge I do now, asking the right questions back again. Because if I was now back then, like if I could try time travel back into my own mind and fire back at him, I'd be like, well, I have a better question for you. Why did you always do it this way when this eliminates a lot of processes and simplifies things?
Right. Or a question could be, okay, so help me understand what the thought process and the logic and reasoning was doing it that way versus something like this, right? To help create a much, I'll say, safer, or be able to create more constructive dialogue between two people.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think, reinforces this whole idea, like the absolute power of questions. And too often we'll tie it back to ego. We can tie it back to a lot of different things.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of times we just want to put in like we're right, or we want to say that, we have to feel like we have to put our 2 cents in, that whatever that is. And the hardest thing to do is actually stop. And I say this, so we'll talk about the relationship thing. I look at this more as a parent and the relationship that I try to continue cultivate with my children around, I know how I was raised, and I am not throwing shade at my parents by any stretch of the imagination, right? I look at that like they were products of a very different environment than I was growing up. And so with that, they did the best they could with what they had, and what they were able to do was not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. So as I look at it, did I also learn things that I could potentially do better? Right. And so when my children, who are much older now, over the years, I've had to take this exact practice of asking better questions, even at the expense of delaying the things that I was feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And using questions to drive better results versus trying to tell someone something. I'm hoping this maybe makes a lot of sense. I don't know. Maybe it makes more sense in my head.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but I can't relate because I don't have kids.
Well, I mean, think about any relationship you have with someone, right? So someone that's close to you.
Yeah.
A lot of times, someone's telling something, and what our normal inclination is to start talking and telling them. And I think one of the best ways that creates more connection, more trust, all those things, is asking really great questions.
Well, and that's I love that you said that, when you're talking to somebody, you're telling them. And it's not coming from a place of hate or anger or whatever. It's just things that you've experienced, and you're trying to impart it onto somebody else.
Right.
And you're trying to help them through whatever they're going through.
I'm not talking to the intention, right?
Yeah.
Because the intention, for most part, for a lot of things, is genuinely good.
Exactly. And
right?
I'm just trying to add a little bit more context to that because, again, because I do it naturally, I'll sometimes just feel like I need to tell somebody because I've done it. It's just a simple logic is like, hey, if you see an alligator bite somebody, you're going to be like, he's going to bite me too. But if somebody behind you hasn't seen the alligator bite somebody and they're not familiar with the alligator, don't know anything about what an alligator is, they might try to go pet it. Yeah. But right, so I'm just trying to build a story around the fact that like when somebody's trying to tell you, it's not coming from a place. However, it's at that moment where you have to take the step back and ask yourself the question is like, what is going to help them through their journey? Right. And it's, again, asking build up questions,
it could be.
Yeah.
It could also be, what is my intention in this moment? Mm-hmm. Like, why do I feel, is what I have to say genuinely that important that I feel I have to impart something? And if so, is there a better way that I could approach this? I think is, because I think I agree. And I think we should step back. I think we should step right back to what am I actually trying to get out of this? Which, funny enough, is one of the key steps in crucial conversations, right? Asking what is the intent here? And if you start with that, 1,000,000%, I think that gives you extreme clarity as to what is it that's going on with me first and foremost. That, okay, this person might be trying to tell me something, and I immediately feel that I have to
overtell them,
impart something to them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not what they're looking for, right? Maybe what they're looking for is just a simple, they're just actually having a conversation, and it's nothing, but we are telling ourselves a whole story about, oh my, I remember this. And we're bringing a whole ton of additional stuff that's probably not even relevant to them, which, then take it back to the sales side. Someone says something, oh, it's too expensive. Well, let me tell you, there's way more expensive things. And we start verbal diarrheaing on this it's literally always the exact same scenario of, hey, so when we're talking about this, are we just...
So the solution is not to just say whatever somebody, say it louder than whatever the other person said.
Oh, that always works. That always works.
Just yell it and you're right.
But it is really about the power of questions, and questions have an amazing ability if we can start to develop that skill. And I think that on 2 episodes ago, when we talked about skill versus mastery, I think asking questions is an absolute area where you could spend the rest of your life learning how to ask better questions and still never achieve, this perfect state. Because there's always a better question to ask.
Exactly.
And there's always things that can help us. And so if we ask a question and it is creating a scenario where someone is feeling defensive, well, then that's partially on us as well. I'm not going to say it's 100%, right? I would also dive into that and say, oh, help me understand that. So when I said this, what caused, I'm feeling there's a little bit of defensiveness there, and that's not my intent here. So help me understand what's going on that, or that would lead you to that. And actually this came up in in a coaching scenario where we were talking about how we actually attach meaning to things. Right, to words. We talked about that in a previous podcast, right? So the power of words and how we attach meaning. And we actually just had an exercise where I asked very direct questions about why, what are the meanings that we're attaching to that? And that's a really powerful exercise too, because then that starts to uncover a whole lot of stuff. It helps us to create awareness. Yeah. And I don't know, are we going in circles? I don't know. I feel like it's such a far-reaching thing that I don't think you could ever convince me differently that asking great questions is not extremely powerful and something that you could do immediately different and learn how to do differently to give you a different result.
You're absolutely right. Questions are, we've been talking about questions for so long that it feels like we might be going into circles, but the reality is that, sometimes you don't know what the right question is up until you ask some of the beginning ones. Yeah. And you were sharing a very, very excellent example earlier. So one of the consulting things we were doing for a little while there, we would typically ask a very basic, oh, how do we do this better?
I think it's one of those things that you look back, you're like, oh man, that was a stupid question. So that's you look back and it's an example of a low quality question, right? Because the response is what dictates if it's a high quality or low quality. So when you ask people, when we're sitting there and we're reviewing things and, you're working with business owners and you say, how could you do this better? And you get a blank look, that's indicative of the quality of the question. Okay. So you have to start, how can I ask this question better? And then Okay.
Well, the truth is that having the smartest person in the room, you can stump them by not asking the right question, right? So the people that, we were working with, there's some very smart, like, people that, know a lot about the things. But when you ask a question like, how can we do this better? That's now, like, brain's just like, oh, what?
Because, right, that pushes you into the, how am I supposed to know what I don't know?
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even know what you're solving for. So that's why I say it's a low quality question. It sounds like a great question. How could we do this differently?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. There might be
Sounds big.
circumstances that question could work. And what we found is that asking different questions will get better results. So when you're going through this specifically, like what causes you the most frustration? Or where are you seeing it takes you the most time, or you're spending the most energy or money or things like that? Well, that allows you to zero in. Then you can start asking better questions around those things specifically.
Exactly.
Right. So
and it's such a encompassing question for every business owner.
Yeah.
Like, if you take anything from this podcast,
don't
write
ask
down
that stupid question. Don't ask that stupid question. How can we do this better?
Or write down this question. Do you want to repeat the question? Where are you? Where? Yeah.
All right.
Where are you finding the most discomfort or frustration, or
where is it taking you the longest?
The objective, yeah.
Right. Whatever. Where are you spending the most time, energy, and money in this activity?
And then again, ask better questions there specifically, like, well, what else could you be doing in that specific space that would alleviate that?
Yeah. And there's another question where I think it's better than how could you do this differently? It's if you had the ability to have a magic wand and take all of the resources or current limitations that you currently have, if you saw this working exactly perfectly the way you envision it in your mind, what does that look like? And then now, if you get a much clearer picture of what it should look like, you can then solve for that by finding, or you might find a million different ways to actually make that come true. But if you don't have that in mind, or you're not able to articulate that, then it's going to be really difficult. Again, so there's, what it comes down to is asking higher quality questions.
One thing I have started doing, and I kind of learned this from you a little bit, was if we were to do this, then we would get, the X result.
Right.
And then work back from that result into, like, what the things I need to do. Remember when we used to put together, like, the project plans on how to, what are the things we need to do? And the first thing you'd always be like, all right, well, this is when we want it done by, this is what we need to do. Right. And then you'd ask questions on, like, how to work backwards, right?
So there's, it's again, I was very fortunate because I actually learned that very simple technique from Blair Singer. So again, Rich Dad advisor for sales. And it's a very similar process they use to put someone on the moon. And it's not exactly, but it's really around, it's called PERT. And I don't remember what it actually stands for, but it's basically what you do is you start with the end in mind, and then you ask the question, okay, here's what I want. What had to happen immediately before that? And so when you're looking at reverse engineering something, right, that's again, just asking a very simple question. Okay, so what had to happen like right before that to make this true? Oh, that. Okay, cool. And you reverse engineer all that, and then you can put your timelines and things around that.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is why I say this all the time. It's, I've coined it, I've trademarked it. Like, you're exactly what you are, and you're not. Maybe I butchered my own saying.
It's highly suspect now. Good Google search.
But I think this is kind of a perfect place for us to.
I disagree.
You want to keep talking about questions?
Keep going. Because there's one more area that I think we can talk about, and because I think it impacts every business. It's when you are recruiting, you're trying to build a team. And well, why is that relevant? One of the biggest parts of when you're trying to bring people on is the interview process. And the interview process is really essentially just a group of questions. And some of those questions are terrible. And if you've had to work with HR before, some of the questions that they ask are terrible, right? And it's so, what is it we're ultimately trying to do in that scenario? We're trying to uncover who somebody truly is. And so if we're asking really low quality questions, how do we have the confidence that we know that this person is going to be a fit? And we're not going to talk about this part about why like core values and things like that are really important and how you can use those to help. But if you really want to dive in, you can start to ask really great questions about people that really, you basically just peel it apart a little bit to get to know who that real person is, to make sure that they're going to be a fit for the business. Not that, oh, you have some skill. Great. I really care less about skill. I care more about purpose, desire, like things that people want to do. And are they coachable? And can I teach them maybe some of the technical side to get them? But going back is that when we're bringing people into an organization, we're bringing them into our company, like we need to ask really great questions to find out, do those people truly belong in our organization? And too often what I find is that business owners they operate from such a scarcity mentality that this person, I need them to have this expertise, and they have to come with all this knowledge already, and they're going to come in and they're going to do this. And they miss the biggest part of that is that you are looking for a person fit, and you can teach them skills, but you're looking for the stuff that you can't really find on paper, right? Like it's not that, I took this course, I know how to do this. That stuff is easy.
And that's why questions is such a fun topic and podcast, conversation piece that we've chosen for this episode specifically, is because there's another step right before the hiring process is sitting down and asking yourself the question of what problem you're looking to get solved.
Yeah.
Right. I know somebody that is kind of in the hiring space at the moment, and he told me he's only hiring PhDs.
I know what you're talking about, and so I'm trying hard not to laugh.
And it's not to undermine anybody that has PhDs. Like,
no,
the reality is like, it's the
equivalent of saying, you have to have a doctorate for something that does not require anything close to that.
And this is why I'm saying, like, you have to sit down and really understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and not just taking a template that you saw online saying that you need this for this and just trying to apply it to yourself. Yeah. Every situation is unique, and every person comes with different skill sets. And this is why we were talking about skill versus mastery, because you can teach skills to everybody. Well, anybody that's willing
given enough time, given enough time,
you can teach.
And somebody that wants to, yes, you can teach them.
Exactly. And however, it doesn't come down to having this one persona fit in that specific area,
or that qualification.
That one qualification.
Yeah, because
yes. Sorry,
I want to make the distinction.
Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. That one qualification in that one specific area, when that qualification doesn't necessarily improve the outcome of that specific piece.
Common thinking fallacy of the business owner, right? We make up these things. And so what we'll say before we maybe close this episode off is think about the things that you're doing. How well are they working for you? And if you're not where you want to be, might you need to do some of those things different? Might you need to ask better questions of yourself? Yeah. Right? Because the truth is, if you're not where you want to be, and not where you're and you're not on that path, and not moving as fast well, then maybe you're not asking yourself really good questions, and maybe you're not being really truthful with yourself.
And then again, applies to so many different fields, applies to your personal relationships, family, business, your employees. And it's, like honestly, question yourself and question yourself in the right way.
Question yourself and have the courage to ask yourself the hard question that you probably are scared to. So if you don't have a great relationship with your partner and your spouse, ask yourself, right? You probably don't want to ask yourself the question like, am I really being the person that is deserving of having that person? And if not, okay, what are the things that I actually need to be doing?
And then what kind of questions I should be asking the other person or your significant other on how you could both improve and be better.
Absolutely.
Right.
And think about then taking that to your teams, right? Actually, that actually just sparked my memory, my thought process around there was something I really want to make sure we talked about is, we're very quick as business owners to want to incentivize people to do something. And what is the one thing that comes to mind immediately when we want money, right? And
I said it before you even finished.
Let me finish
thinking
asking
about money. It's top of mind.
And great. And it's a normal thing because we think that most people are motivated by money. How many times have we actually sat down with someone that works with us, works for us, and say, what is it that would actually help you make you feel the most fulfilled and living at purpose in your life while being here? I bet you not one of us has sat down and had that conversation, or rarely have ever had that conversation with someone. And so what we've done is now we assume that if I give you more money, you're going to want to work harder. That makes no fucking sense at all, because we've missed the great opportunity of asking some of the best questions to someone to say, actually, what is it that motivates you? What are the things that you love? What would make you feel so at purpose and so, just invigorated or motivated to want to do more? Like how, and guess what? If it's not money, well, then how can you help to do that? Oh, I want to take on more responsibility. Great. What does that look like for you? Help me understand that. You might be surprised that it might not require any additional money. People may just want to feel like they are more empowered, they have more say, that they're taking more and more responsibility, but we've never given that opportunity because we, like many times, we just assume, like when someone says something, that we know what they mean, but we haven't asked the great questions to qualify what exactly
and
that
align
means.
on exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, like you talk about the one thing that can change your life is asking better questions. And funny enough, there is a book we're going to recommend, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life.
Yeah. That's
And
a really good
if that would sum up this whole podcast episode is change your questions, change your life, change your business, change your whole fucking reality.
I want to add to the piece about being a leader and having people below you. I have a friend of mine. I'm gonna give you a little shout out, Jarrett. I'm
bleeping at it.
He reminded me recently about this one question that I used to ask all the time, and I learned it from him. And then I kind of through my business owner journey, business consulting journey, business, coaching, all that. Yeah, I lost that question, and it's such a simple question. It's like, what does success look like for Saad? What does success look like for Darris? Right? And it goes back to immediately a lot of business owners immediately assume that money is top of mind instead of really understanding, how to motivate somebody, how to actually solve or fulfill the purpose of that person that is trying to.
Do you know the funny thing about that question?
What's that?
Is that if you go ask business owners what does success look like to them, most of them will not be able to answer that question.
No.
Right?
No.
And so maybe that just further, not maybe, But that just further solidifies the fact that we don't ask ourselves the right questions.
And again, goes back to our last episode about skills and mastery. Most business owners want to make sure they keep every single dollar to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good portion. Scarcity mindset.
Exactly.
Right? Again, but then mindset, growth, or fix, right? So do we operate in an area of abundance where we believe that there actually is enough for everyone and we can all be tremendously successful together? Or are we much more closed-minded where we believe, oh, only I can, there's only enough for me?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is the
time.
I'm saying we're gonna.
This is where we call it.
Is this where we call it?
I think this is where we call it. So, thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you for listening to this massive podcast about questions.
We are not sorry that we went long. I'm not one bit, because I think where the topics deserve, we want to put enough context around it to thoroughly give enough understanding that, like, when we say minimum effective dose, some of these things are actually far more reaching than most of us are really aware of.
Yep.
And so thank you for, one, listening to this much longer podcast than normal. Second of all, thank you for continually being on this journey with us. So for those of you who have been here since the beginning, thank you. Those who are just joining, go back and get caught up. But thank you for dialing in and tuning in to us and listening to some of our,
go back, get caught up on what we talk about. We focus on frameworks. So this is for the people that are new.
Yeah.
And, I think, again, to summarize a little bit, questions help with your critical thinking, your innovation, your tough conversations, your growth.
It's probably the single quickest thing you can do to change where you are immediately.
Exactly.
So,
and hopefully we were able to do that for you guys today.
Yes.
If you found this helpful, please share, like, subscribe, comment down below.
Hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube. Make sure your notifications are on when your phone's on.
Yeah.
When you're not in a flow state.
Exactly.
And to always, our mothers, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate everything, and everyone continue. If you found it all, again, just please share, write a review, write a comment. That helps the algorithm push us out a little bit more. And like we said, we don't charge, we don't get anything from this other than we're here to support you as business owners and entrepreneurs, and we're here to help. That's our mission here. So thank you very much. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.